So, Asoka the Geek here, and I have a very special guest today. I have Rocco, and I'm going to butcher his last name. I should have asked for him how to pronounce his last name. Is it Tartamella? Tartamella?
It's Tartamella, yeah.
Awesome. Rocco Tartamella, who is a sculptor who has done a lot of work for Diamond Select, and I'm sure a lot of other things which we'll get into. But, Rocco, thank you so much for joining me today, first of all.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me to do the interview.
Well, obviously for me, your work so far that I got into joy is with your beautiful Diamond Select statues. And look, I have them prepared. I have your new Catwoman and Harley Quinn right here that I'm looking at. And you are just so talented, man. Your work is awesome. And I want to get into all that and Diamond Select and everything. But Rocco, would you kind of first just go into your background a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about how you became a sculptor and just your background?
Yeah, I appreciate it too. Thanks for the support. I grew up in New York, and then we moved to Florida. It was really boring, going to high school here. There was nothing to do. Everything was so far away. I was used to everything close growing up. And I started getting into drawing a lot. I was collecting comic books here and there in the 90s. And I fell in love with Tom McFarlane stuff and a lot of the guys who started Image. So I went from drawing a lot to, as I was getting older, I wanted to branch out to other things. And I was going through this period where I was kind of stressed. So I went and I read an article somewhere that if you, start working with clay, it de-stresses you. So I was like, hey, it's not a bad idea. So I got some super sculpting, real basic stuff at like Michael's hobby shop. And I just started like working on stuff. I was like, I need some tools. And I started making my own tools and I started buying some cheap stuff. And before you knew it, I had like a whole table full of things.
Wow.
Like, maybe I should try to do something with this, And my family was like, oh yeah, you're real talented. And I look back at my older pieces and I start laughing at how bad it is.
Yeah.
But I guess it was good enough to get an internship with Art Asylum. So I went and I worked. They were in Gold Street in Brooklyn at the time. So I went there and I was interning for about a year. And then from there, I took some time off after I left. And I wanted to hone my skills more. Because I did a lot of little things at the Art Asylum. I was working the mold shop, cleaning off castings for... they were doing stuff for Toy Biz at the time. We're working on Lord of the Rings. So I got to work on the first prototypes for those. And
Nice.
I did some repair stuff on some of the figures there, like the ring rates and some of the other characters, like Boromir. I had to repair some stuff. I played with one of the horses too for the Lord of the Rings, and I had a lot of fun. Actually, I took some of the pieces home with me, and I started to practice to see if I could recreate what some of the other sculptors were doing there.
Yeah.
It was good practice, so I started building up a strong portfolio, and then I sent some video and some pictures into McFarlane Toys, and they liked what they saw. So I was able to get like a first steady gig with them up in New Jersey.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow, so much to unpack there, because that's a really interesting story. I want to go way back, though, to your first thing you mentioned. When you moved from New York to Florida, how old were you, Rocco?
About 10 or 11.
So, honestly, I've been in New York. I love New York. It's like a hustle, bustle, so interesting, a lot of life hitting you on the street every day. So you mentioned it was kind of a big change for you moving to Florida. Was it just the slower pace in Florida, or what was that like?
Yeah, it was like night and day, because everything was just so far away. In New York, you've got corner stores, all your neighbors. It's like you're completely taken out of your element when you go to somewhere completely new to begin with. But then where we're in Florida, it was just the distance for everything was miles away. So we need to get on our bikes and get going for a while if I wanted to go to a comic shop or toy store or even to the supermarket. Nothing was close like how I remember when I was growing up.
Wow, that's so interesting. And then, how did you like the weather though, compared to New York? Or I guess we were both on the same coast, but Florida obviously get a little tropical. Did you like the weather at least, or did you miss those New York's winters?
Oh, I love fall time. I always have. I always will. But yeah, I got used to the heat eventually here.
Gotcha. Then, you mentioned that you how old were you when you started to do the sculpting at first? You mentioned that you kind of read about that sculpting helps you distress. You were already into art. How old were you when that was happening? Was that like in high school or was that earlier?
It was after high school because I had all kind of jobs after high school. I worked in the restaurant business. I worked as developing film, working in a photo lab.
Nice.
Yeah, I worked in a pizzeria. I worked everywhere. But I think all those little jobs, I had no calling for it, So it was. I think it was about 19 or 20 when I started picking at Sculpey for the first time.
And up until then, were you always still like collecting comic books and action figures? Were you still always into the geeky stuff up until you started sculpting? Was that always a part of your life?
I kind of slowed down when I was around 20, but I was always collecting action figures or Kyoto toys.
Nice.
I thought they were fascinating, and I just loved the articulation that they were coming up with at the time.
And were you as far as your artistic side goes, when you were like in high school or just kind of growing up, were you just kind of drawing on your own? Did you take any classes? Did you do any formal training?
No formal training at all.
That's impressive. So you're around 19 or 20. You're looking at sculpting, playing with clay, and you just from just your natural skills, it sounds like you just found out that you're really good at it.
Yeah, I was having fun. I didn't know if I was good at it, but I was definitely having fun.
Well, it sounds like you were good at it to get you where you are. And then, what was your first? So you mentioned you sent some. Did you like take pictures of what you did and submit it to companies, or how did you kind of get your foot into the door in the industry based on what you were doing at that point?
Well, I was taking photos. I was sending it to people. I wasn't getting much response back, but I found in one of the toy magazines at the bookstore the address for Art Asylum. So I set up a meeting. Well, I called them up and I was asking if I could interview or intern or anything. I wanted my foot in the door because I knew that the toy industry is where I wanted to go, or statues, collectibles, something along those lines. So they were nice enough to give me an interview, and when I got there, they said they don't have any jobs. But I was visiting family anyway, so it wasn't like I went directly,
Gotcha.
Solely. I spent all money out of pocket to go and interview for, no position. No. I was visiting family and friends, and while we were there, I said, "Can we stop by?" And they said, "Yeah." So I stopped by, and they said, "We do a lot of internships, and if it works out, then we can hire you full time." So okay, I'll do an internship. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you're back. So you just literally got an address out of a magazine, wrote a letter, and sent some pictures, and that's impressive, man. Like that's so ambitious and like bold. You know what I mean? It's like that's great.
I guess I'm always that way, just by nature.
Yeah, it paid off. And then, so you're Florida now. You get to go back home to Brooklyn. It sounds like for this internship.
Yep.
How long was the internship for?
I was there, I think, 6 months before they offered me pay. So then I worked as like minimum wage just to work in the mold shop for about 2 months.
When you first got there and like your first day, do you remember that? Like, were you pretty nervous? Was it just like, you kind of, this is what you wanted and now you were there? Do you remember what that was like?
I was definitely excited to go there, but I have to say, because it was in not a nice part of town, Flatbush Avenue and Gold Street, it was before they were cleaning it up.
Oh yeah, before the gentrification, before it became like really expensive.
Yeah, so I was there in a transitional point, and when I got off the bus stop, I saw a few things that I was like, "Wow, what am I doing?" Because as soon as I walked towards the building, there was a pawn shop there, and a homeless guy, broke the window and started urinating inside the shop. And I went, "Oh boy!" And then I walked 2 doors down and knocked on the door, and they buzzed me in.
And then you're like, you know what? Florida's not so bad. Florida's actually not too bad now that I think about it. You know.
I was still excited to work in the toy company then.
That's awesome. So you get in there, and so first of all, Lord of the Rings. I remember buying those figures back in the day, and so I totally remember those. So you worked on fixing things for other sculptors. So you were kind of like a sculpting assistant with that. Well, you're an intern, so you're just kind of doing whatever they want, right?
Yeah, whatever I was there for, because I was mostly in the mold shop and helping them with the castings. So when the castings would come out, sometimes things they weren't perfect. So I had to clean off all the seams, and then they were really had a lot of that fine work, that like lace work on some of the outfits. So I was going in there trying to scribe out all the seam lines and put back in all of the lace work with a few tools.
Wow, that's so cool. And then you were there 6 months. Then they offer you a full-time position.
Yeah.
When you were offered that position, was it as a sculptor, like
No.
full-time, or
No.
what was it like?
The full-time position was to work in molding and casting, because they needed a lot of help in that department, because they didn't have many. I think they had 2 guys working there, and they had a pretty heavy workload coming in from Toy Biz at the time.
Okay.
And then they had their own stuff too. They had their own lines of figures, and their sculpting department was pretty full. I think there was about 5 or 6 guys in the sculpting department, and they had 3 or 4 guys in the illustration department.
Wow. Could you take me through, and for me, everyone listening, like, I'll say I know a little bit about toy manufacturing just from being collectors and hearing, interviews and things. Can you take me to the process of, like, when a figure is, like, from drawing to final product? Like, what's that process like?
Well, first, after they get the license for whatever it is that we're going to be making, usually an illustrator gets brought on. They start discussing the property, and, do we put accessories in there? Do we do articulation? How much articulation do you want to put in there? They go back and forth with seeing the cost of what it would be to put, because the more articulation, the more expensive.
Right.
Because when you cut steel in China, then it gets, the price keeps going up the more articulation you have. So after they work out, the financials on what they want to design, then somebody will, illustrate it and get approval from the licensor. And then from that point, then the sculptor gets involved. And if it's a comic book character, not movie-based, typically there's an easier approval process that goes through.
Yeah.
Because, comic books, it's just, okay, whoever is in charge of at Marvel or DC or wherever they're getting the license from, there's a department that they know the property, they know the characters and what they should look like, and they usually keep it up to date, because they start changing the look sometimes of Superman, Batman, so they make sure it's, current, unless you have a license that's a throwback, so after the sculptor gets involved and starts putting in the articulation and sculpts everything, it typically gets, it gets approved pretty quickly, unless you're working with movie studios. Then there's a lot of wait time, because not only do the actors have to approve their likenesses, you also have the movie studios. The director sometimes has to get involved. So it goes to a lot of different people before you finally get approval on, like, the movie characters.
That's so interesting. I never thought about all that. You know what I mean? I figured the actor would have to sign off on it, but I didn't think about, like, the director. I guess it makes sense if it's like a costume or something from their movie.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Wow.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, like the pieces you have in front of you there, the Catwoman. Yeah, Tim Burton had to approve that before Michelle Pfeiffer did.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So after like 30 years of him being done with these movies, he still has the power to, like, approve merchandising or not.
Oh yeah, yeah. Huh. And even the Nightmare Before Christmas stuff, he has to approve all of that stuff.
Does it get to the point wherever you talk to him directly if he wants to communicate any ideas to you, or is it always through intermediaries or just?
Oh, it's always through the company. Well, they have the directors and actors usually have assistants that talk to Marvel or DC, wherever they've done a movie for, and then they talk to, like in this case, Diamond. And Diamond would say, "Hey, got good news for you," or "Oh, I got kind of good news. We got to tweak something."
So, like with this Catwoman, for example, did
Yeah.
this go through that many incarnations, or did this one get approved pretty quickly?
I got approved in one go.
Nice.
Yeah. So and the Harley Quinn that recently came out, yeah, that one. She went through, I think, 6 different revisions just on her face.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when that happens, is it like they write some notes, send it to you, you have to revise the sculpt, send it back to them, and all that kind of back and forth?
Yeah. So those were I didn't sculpt those by hand. I sculpted those on computer because I went from hand sculpting and wax and clay to digital. Now I'm kind of exclusively digital, so it's a lot easier. I could take my screen grabs right from ZBrush, and then send those to the licensor, so I don't have to set up a whole camera studio like I had to do for the clay pieces, get the lighting right, all that. I mean, you still have to play with lighting though in the computer, but it's a little easier.
What happens though, Rocco, is when you're doing it on the computer and they approve like this one, right? And then you do a physical version, I assume.
Yeah.
Do they still have the authority to are they still giving you notes on it even when it gets to like a printed out stage, or I'm not printed out, a physically sculpted stage?
Well, yeah, I 3D print all my own work too. So after I get that 3D printed, they don't have to approve the print, but it goes to the painters, and then once the painter is working on it, sometimes they'll go, okay, they want revisions on both the paint and the sculpt.
Wow.
That's happened a few times. It's kind of rare. It's typically with maybe higher profile actors like Margot there.
Yeah.
And, I did a piece from the Wolverine movies, the Logan movie.
Yeah.
It was at Toy Fair. It eventually got approved, but I don't know if Diamond officially released photos yet. I got to double check on that. But Hugh Jackman took a little while to get an approval on because he's filming so many movies and he's always on location.
It's like I imagine they're like on set in between lunch and some assistant's running up with something for them to approve. You know what I mean? Probably something like that.
Yeah, I could imagine.
So Rocco, that's really interesting. Like, can you tell me a little bit about kind of when you first started, the techniques and how it's changed? You mentioned 3D printing. You mentioned how you sculpt pretty much digitally. So when you first started out, though, it was all by hand sculpting, I would imagine. How did that transition happen? Or were you always, on the cutting edge of technology and looking at that stuff? Or did it take a while for you to make the transition to these modern techniques now?
I was computer resistant. Yeah. I really enjoy, working in clay because you can get a feel. You can get an attitude much quicker in the piece that you're sculpting by hand, and then if you want to add a little something to it, I'm very physical, so I will grab the piece and I will start bending and turning the figure and seeing what kind of positioning looks cooler.
Yeah.
And that's not so easy to do in digital. You kind of already have to have it in your head what you want it to look like.
I gotcha. So with the clay, you literally are molding it with your hands. You're sculpting it a certain way. You can improvise. You can see how light's hitting it, make changes. And then with digital, you have to have it more thought out, probably before you start. So and I apologize for my ignorance. I'm not an artist by any means. So when you're sculpting with clay, is it the same thing sculpting digitally? Because I imagine you're sculpting with clay. You're using your hands. You're using tools. How does that translate to doing it digital? How do you do it digitally?
It almost feels like you're drawing rather than sculpting.
Yeah. Okay.
Digital. I mean, it's like you have a 3D drawing in front of you. Like I start out with usually like a sphere or a ball, like simple shapes, and then like if I have to sculpt like a Batman, I will put you can put symmetry on it. So if you pull one side out to create like an arm, both sides will move at the same time. So I will, I get him in the most static T pose when I'm sculpting a character who has like a real like when I sculpted Ben Affleck from the Justice League movies.
Yeah.
I did for Diamond. I had to start him out in a T pose because there was so much detail. I had to make sure it was equal on both sides. So once I did that static T pose, then I went and started to move them. And when you're moving stuff in the computer, you kind of like squishing. So you almost have to sculpt them twice.
Wow. And so when you first had to do it on the computer, I would imagine you had to learn the program first before you even attempted to sculpt anything. How long did it take you to learn that program, to learn how to use the computer to do this?
Well, I basically got the program and then I locked myself in my office for about 6 to 8 months. And I was any video I could see on how to do something on YouTube, I would watch the video like 4 or 5 times in a row. Then I'd try the techniques on the computer. I was going back and forth. I was trying to learn through watching others, what they did. And then add in, because a lot of the guys who started with ZBrush, a lot of them never hand sculpted before. So in my head, I already know, I have a better grasp of form than, say, a novice who's never sculpted before, and also how wrinkles flow on fabrics, and and then I also have that background of I've been hand sculpting for probably close to 15 years before I jumped into digital. So I knew the process of undercuts on certain parts of a sculpt and what has to be backfilled, what won't work, what will work when you go into production. Like a lot of the videos I saw, like, how do you do clothing when I first started? Because a lot of these guys on the ZBrush, they would make like, it was literally as thin as fabric. But, say you have a character like Pennywise the Clown, because I sculpted a few of those for Diamond. He's got this really fluffy, outfit on.
Right.
That can't be thin and hollow. So, you have to make it out of a sphere and then, cut in all the wrinkles and everything, but also know that underneath those wrinkles, he's got, shoulders and arms. You can't go too far in or it won't look realistic, and I try to, my forte is realism and trying to get movie accurate stuff.
That's so interesting. So when you first started, you locked yourself in for 6 to 8 months and you forced yourself to learn it. Was it like a very conscious decision, like, hey man, the industry is going this way, I have to learn this, otherwise I'll have to change jobs? Was it that sort of kind of dilemma you were in that you had to make a decision on?
Yeah, definitely. I would say most definitely. That's probably the main reason why I jumped into it. I was like, I really have to learn this. And if I can't get it, then, maybe I'll start doing more illustrations, because I started doing caricature work, actually, in between clay sculpting and jumping into digital. So I did a few things. It's on my website, some of those early caricatures I did.
Yeah, actually, I have your Instagram up here. Let's take a look.
Yeah, let's go to like roccotartamella.com. You see, I need to update more though.
It's okay, man. I think that's very true with artists. Most of their sites probably need like someone to manage it for them. You're too busy sculpting. And Rocco, what's your so now that it sounds like you're fully doing it digitally. Do you miss the hand sculpting a lot now, or are you pretty comfortable with the digital and you prefer that, or what would you prefer still?
I like both probably equally now. It's still a lot of fun to hand sculpt, but I could quickly get what I need out of the digital.
Dude, and I always look at your stuff on your Instagram and like your Abraham Lincoln, and some of this, it's amazing. How long does it take you to So, like, let's take a look at this, the Catwoman one that didn't get any notes on it. How long did it take you to sculpt this whole thing?
She took about a week.
Man, that's not that long at all. I thought I didn't know what I was expecting to hear, but yeah, that doesn't sound like too long.
Well,
So that's fast.
yeah, I've heard from some guys they take about a month to 2 months sometimes on a piece like that. You know, I'm a little obsessive though.
Well,
I don't like to sleep.
so you're a workaholic then? You're up all night sculpting?
Yeah, I'm pretty. Yeah, I mean, if you ask my wife, I've fallen asleep a few times at the tablet.
Well, that's good, bro. That means you're passionate. You're not looking at the clock like, oh, and so that's great. And man, I got to say, this Harley Quinn, this is one of my favorite pieces. Yeah. I just the clothing, the style of it, even the packaging they did on this was awesome. I didn't even want to take it out of the package, but man, you did a great job on this one and all of them.
Thanks so much. Originally her full outfit there, all the diamonds.
Yeah.
I had sculpted that raised.
Oh shit.
Yeah, it was giving me such a headache. I mean, those diamonds alone. I think I worked 5 straight days just getting the outfit just right. And then DC got back and said, "Oh, we want to see that as a stamp instead of raised." And I was like, no.
I mean, it looks the detail on this as is amazing. I can't imagine how it would have been raised. So that would have been awesome. So getting back a little bit, sec. So you had that job, the first one. Then you got with McFarlane Toys. How long were you with McFarlane for? And kind of what did you work on there?
I was there for about a year as well. When I was first working there, they immediately put me on you remember the Spawn and the Throne, the garbage heap?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, that was actually sculpted by probably the whole team in the studio.
Yeah.
So one guy roughed out the figure, another person roughed out the throne, and then in like a much softer clay, and then they molded it and poured it up in a hard wax, and then they cut it up, and everyone in the studio got a piece. I got the piece, I think the right part of the throne where he had the skull sticking out, and the big piece of glass there. I sculpted that portion, and I think I sculpted the hands on that one too. And from there, I started working on some others. They had me roughing out some figures too, and I started roughing out Onimusha 2. Remember that video game?
Oh yeah.
Line. Yeah. So I roughed out the whole line of figures, and a lot of it I did on my free time. I took like the files home, and when I had them all roughed out, we showed them to Todd because we didn't officially get the license yet.
Yeah.
The Capcom guys sent in folders to McFarlane Toys and said, "Hey," and this is before everybody knew how lucrative video game properties were.
Right.
So there wasn't much video game figures out there. So my brother was working in the illustration department, and he said, "Hey, is this Onimusha?" So he came running down, and he was like, "Hey, Rock, look what they've got." So I was like, "Oh, are they working on this?" And they said, "No, we don't have the license." So I literally took it home and worked on all of those figures on my own, and then we showed them to the heads there and Todd via satellite because he was in Arizona. McFarlane Toys Studios in Bloomingdale, New Jersey. So he was like, "Oh, let's go for it then. Let's just get the license." So from there, then we started to fine tune all the pieces too.
Wow, that's awesome, man. So like basically a project you did on your own, more or less, got them the license for that, and that was all your own initiative and just doing it out of passion.
Yep, that's basically what I like to do.
That's great. So you were at McFarlane for a year, and then what happened after that? Where'd you go, or what did you do after McFarlane?
After McFarlane, I took some time off. Yeah. Probably, I might have taken like 6 months off after I left McFarlane because we were there during 9/11.
Oh wow.
And it was just, I didn't like the area anymore. You know, I don't know what was going on. There's a lot of uncertainty. And I was like, you know, a lot of guys are doing freelance, and they're doing pretty good at freelance.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, maybe I'll try freelance. So I moved back to Florida for a little while, and I started doing my own things. I started making like Arnold Schwarzenegger from The Predator, and I started making like God busts, and I was trying to hone in my skills more, like what I've learned working at McFarlane Toys. I was like, let me, take that back to my personal stuff.
Yeah.
And from there, I contacted Diamond for the first time. I think that was 2002. And Chuck from Diamond, he's awesome. Chuck Tercera is like one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the industry. Him and Jason Whitney contacted me, and they said, hey, how would you like to do a couple busts for us? And I worked on a Punisher bust with a sniper rifle, and then a Hobgoblin, and a Cable bust that after production came out, I found out later that he had a glow-in-the-dark eye. Like, I didn't know until I had him on the desk, and I was underneath my lamp, and then I was going to sleep, so I went and shut the light, and I went, is his eye glowing? And I ran over and looked at it. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, from there I started doing more and more freelance, and I've worked with, so many companies.
Have you, so how many statues have you done for Diamond, would you say, in the last almost 20 years?
Wow. That's a good question.
I was like, I have a ton of them, and I try to, whenever I post, mention who sculpted, who designed it, Rocco. You know what I mean? That's just me in the last 2 months posting stuff. And I can't imagine, to come up with a number, but I mean, you've done a lot of statues for him.
I should count. I've probably done, I might have made close to 100. I don't know.
I would say easily. And what other companies are you freelancing for right now, Rocco? Have you done stuff for, like, do you still do stuff for, like, McFarlane, DC, like Hasbro? Like, who else do you do sculpting for?
I've actually haven't sculpted for McFarlane again after we left. I've worked for Bowen Designs, but we're in, the Bowen line of Marvel and DC.
Oh, shit. I remember those, yeah.
Yeah, I did a Hercules bust for him, and a Black Knight, and I did a Professor X, but it never got released. I think they resculpted the whole thing. I don't know why, but
that's weird.
Yeah, sometimes they did that though. They would hire one team to work on something and then change everything after it got approved. So I don't know. It was just a process. I guess every studio's got a different process. But he was a pretty nice guy to work for. I did stuff for Funko.
Yeah.
I did blanking out here. The animated series, the Star Wars.
The Clone Wars.
The Clone Wars. Thank you. Yeah, I did a lot of figures there. I did a couple bounty hunters for them. I did the Darth Vader computer sitter for them too.
Nice.
And I did a Christmas Yoda for them.
That's awesome.
And I did an Asoka for them as well.
See, my name only became popular after that character came out. So until that character, people just couldn't pronounce my name, and now they ask me, "Oh, you watch Star Wars?" Which is funny because I'm a huge Trekkie, Rocco. Rocco, but I'm a huge Trekkie. So I'm like, no, I'm a Trekkie. I don't like Star Wars. Anyways, that's a different story. But what do you like working on the most, like from the characters? Like for you, is it just the joy of sculpting, or do you love the DC stuff? Do you like the Marvel stuff? What gets you the most excited when you're sculpting? Which characters?
I do. It's the joy of sculpting. It really is. In fact, if I ever release a picture book, I may call it that, the joy of sculpting.
There you go. Use it.
I love portraits because when I was first illustrating, I love Norman Rockwell.
Oh yeah. His
paintings, his illustrations, his charcoal work, his oil, whatever. Anything Norman Rockwell, I gobbled up. So when I do realism, I kind of try to tap into, the work that he did for the Saturday Evening Post was just amazing, and I kind of want to put that into my sculpts. You know, like I want things to look so real that it, you know, if it's painted well enough that people will go, "Oh wow, is that real or is that a sculpt?"
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. Like this Harley Quinn one, I keep bringing back. Like I remember when I was seeing pictures of it. You know, it looked lifelike. You know, it's done so well. Um, what for you for sculpting? Is this kind of it for you career wise? Like this is what you want to do, or like do you want to get into more illustrating, comic book art, anything like that, or are you pretty content with the sculpting?
I'm pretty content with the sculpting. You know, even if you know, when work slows down, I get a lot of private commission work, and in fact, it kind of stops me from making my own things. Sometimes my schedule gets busy.
Well,
But
that's good that you do private commissions. If I ever become really rich, there's definitely a bunch of characters I would love for you to do. So that's that's good to know. Nice. What does what does Rocco like to do, if you don't mind me asking, in your spare time? You're not sculpting, which sounds like you spend a lot of time sculpting. What other hobbies are you into? What else do you like to do?
when I do have time, I do occasionally illustrate still. You know, I like to sit down with my kids and you know we try to draw stuff together. You know,
Nice. Well, awesome.
I love my family, so any free time I'm hanging out with them, we're doing something.
Yeah, I know how it is. I have a 16-month-old, so my first one.
Okay.
So, thank you. So yeah, anytime I'm not doing stuff like this or well, obviously my regular job, I just like to spend with her. You know, so I totally relate to that.
You
Well,
really find though when as your child gets older, you know, you really grow as a person. I found, you know,
yeah.
like the childish things like fall away. I'm not saying that collecting is childish, so don't
No,
misunderstand
of
me.
course not. Of course
I
not.
mean, like just like your people's attitudes, you know.
Yeah.
Like me from 15 years ago, you know, I don't know if I would recognize me today. You know, I'm a
No.
lot more responsible today.
Oh, it's so true, man. I know what you mean. Like just my whole thought process now with even when I'm looking for a job, right? It's not even about okay, is it going to be 9 to 5? Am I going to be able to just enjoy myself? It's more like okay, is this going to help me reach my goals for my family, for my wife, for my daughter, and what they need? You know, and so yeah, the Asoka 15 years ago too. I wouldn't. He wasn't very responsible like I am today, so I can relate to that as well.
It's life, you know. You're going
Yeah.
through all those stages.
Absolutely. Well, Rocco, I think it's a good time to wrap it up because I really appreciate your time. We went over a little bit here, but man, just you have such an impressive career, and the quality of work you produce is awesome, and man, just it's amazing. So thank you so much for joining me today, bro. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the time too. And if anyone wants to know more about me, go to roccotartamella.com. I recently opened up my Etsy page too, so
Oh, okay.
I'm starting to sell some of the signed pieces. A lot of the samples I've gotten. So
Perfect.
I'm offering things like the Harley Quinn,
Awesome.
some of the bus. I got some exclusives up there too.
Perfect. Well, yeah. So we'll Rocco's site, his Instagram page. When I post this, Rocco, I'll be sure to post a link to your Instagram page and all that. So, yeah. But no, dude, thanks so much again for joining me today, and you have a good weekend, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. You too.
All right. Thanks, Rocco. Take care, sir.
Anytime.